Hey everyone, I'm Loyal Wooldridge, the BC NDP candidate for Kelowna Centre, and this is Loyal's Community QuickCast. And in 15 minutes or less, we are going to share with you some important issues and solutions to some of Kelowna's biggest challenges. And we're coming in live and recorded with some leaders in our community that are going to share some of their experiences as subject matter experts. And today, we're talking about housing, and I'm really excited to share today with Shane Worman, who's been a home builder in Kelowna for 32 years and also now transitioning into commercial development. And Shane's also played a pivotal role in the homeless serving sector, where he served on the Journey Home Task Force as well as the Journey Home Board. So welcome, Shane.
Thank you. So a lot solutions in there? I don't know. That's pretty brave.
You're going to have some solutions today.
Nobody ever listens to me, though.
We're always
Thanks for trying. Yeah, I appreciate that.
So we're going to jump right into it. I think when everyone looks around Kelowna, you see cranes, you see infill, you see a lot of housing. And some of the conversations that I have around the council table and the feedback we get is there's way too much development going on in Kelowna. But we also know that we are in a housing crisis and a lot of young people can't find housing. So I wanted to just jump in and talk about all housing being good housing, and maybe we could pull up kind of the housing continuum to share with folks kind of what that means. Because one of the things that I hear a lot about is, that's great that you're building housing, but is it affordable? And so it's all part of a continuum. And maybe, Jason, we could pull that graphic up to show folks.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge is new housing is never going to be affordable housing.
Right.
We're building at the highest end of the scale because we're building new. So we're building in a market where labor's high, where labor shortages are high, where materials are expensive, more so than they've ever been in the history. But if we don't build new, there's nowhere for people to go and there's no movement for people. So the new opens up spaces in maybe some of those more affordable ones, which is, maybe the house someone grew up in the 80s or 90s that now isn't as desirable as the new home up on the hill or the new condo.
Right.
So I think that, I think when people say there's too much being built, I don't think we can ever build enough. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that, the only way we ever get to affordable is if we actually have oversupply.
Right. Supply
It's
and
simple.
demand.
Yeah, it's simple, right? Places like Edmonton have a 10 to 15% vacancy rate.
Right. And we
don't.
We struggle to get just above 1.
Right, exactly.
Which I think a healthy market's around 3%.
3 to 5.
What we aim for.
Yep.
And then, of course, like Shane talked about, people move through the cycle of housing, obviously, from one end of being emergency shelter for our unhoused population, through supportive housing for folks that can't afford homes and need extra care, as well as subsidized, and then you move into rental housing and home ownership, hopefully, is where we get people. So I love this graphic from the City of Kelowna, and I go back to it often. Now, something that we're seeing quite a bit on council is an influx of rental housing, which we haven't seen, I think, for a couple of decades, the type of investment that we're seeing into rentals. So why are we seeing so much rental, and why is it so important that we bring that
so I think,
market?
from a development standpoint, right, one of the things that has hurt the building of rental, or the one thing that hurt the building of rental over the years, is strata.
Right.
So as soon as there's strata, what the development industry can do is sell the smallest package, right? You can sell individual homes to people, and there's a margin in that. When you go to rental housing, it's a whole different thing, and it means that you've got a much longer horizon on how long it takes and how much money you have to put in to build a development in the first place. And so under previous conditions, condos were the best way to go. Now what we're seeing is, for the first time in literally most of my career here, so 32 years, I can remember in the 90s and up to about 2010, 2012, there was I could point to the one apartment building that was built in Kelowna. And so the mindset changed a little bit because there's been some programs and incentives to do that. And now we get into a place where condominiums aren't selling, so developers are going, well, we still have to provide jobs, we still have to put people to work, we still need to make a living. So we're shifting because there are some programs out there that help us to be able to make the math work on an apartment building for the first time in a long time.
Right.
But it's a slippery slope, and that can, I can tell you that it's very marginal at best. So, we should take advantage, and our community should take advantage of getting as many rentals built right now as we can, because it will change.
Right.
So cycles.
So the production we're seeing of rental right now is really tied to the programs and incentives that are available through government investment?
Through various levels of government, yeah. Like, so we did one a few years ago, rental building, and one of the things that made a big difference was the program that the city had where you get a break on municipal taxes for 10 years.
Right.
So that helps us because that really comes to our bottom line, which says, oh, okay, now we can afford to borrow enough. 10 years when that program goes away, hopefully we've paid down enough debt, rent has increased enough that we can go ahead and move forward. But.
Right. And it's that margin that you need to be able to show to a lender to be able to secure financing, right?
100%.
Because a lot of folks say to me, well, why don't developers just prioritize building affordable housing? And so would it be fair to say that it needs to pencil out so that a lender is actually going to give you the capital?
I think, why doesn't the grocery store sell the milk cheaper? Why aren't apples picked and given away? The building industry, I think, and the development industry in Kelowna is one of our drivers.
Right.
And I think we forget that a lot of times, right? We get industries that tout how much money they bring into the economy. We as an industry haven't done a very good job to show, if you look around, find somebody that you know and see how many of those people work in the circle of development, whether it's building, whether it's maintenance, whether it's owner, there's a lot of jobs in our sector. And a lot of good paying jobs actually as well. So.
And I think that can't be underlined enough is the good paying jobs that people can actually have in the sector, whether it's maintenance, like you say, or actually
in the construction,
in the construction side of it. Yeah. What has really impacted affordability and availability of housing over the years, would you say?
So I think, it's just like everything, right? It's inflation, right? There's a big cost to things. One of the conversations that I'd like to be had at the provincial level, so if you're fortunate enough to get in, I'd sure hope you bring it up, but is the taxes make up as much as 31% of a new home development. So when you think about, we're paying PST, we were paying GST, we still will be on non-rentals product, plus all the municipal, plus all the fees that go a long way. So if you took the average house and it was $300,000, suddenly it would be $200,000 if there was no tax there.
Right.
If I've done my math right, somebody will fact check me on that. I probably went too fast, but probably should go to $1 million down to $700,000. Anyway.
I'm sure there have been development institutes.
Yeah, somebody will check it out. But so that's a big impact. Mm-hmm. And so if we were to look at it and say, okay, well, we've decided that an apple doesn't have PST on it or GST, but a candy bar does. If affordable housing is a need in our community, why are we still taxing it the same way we tax high-end?
Right.
Cars are the same. You go over a certain value, you have a luxury tax. So, I think that there's some room within the tax policy, both provincially and federally, to help incentivize and make housing more affordable. Mm-hmm. And then really it's just the cost of things have gotten more expensive, right? Land is harder to find.
Yeah.
So we all want to live in a beautiful community. We don't want to live somewhere more affordable.
Right. And so obviously land, financing, the products, they all contribute to the cost of housing. Now there's been some more incentives coming online, I know, with the City of Kelowna through our land acquisition strategy. We're coming to the table with land to partner with the private sector. And then through the new BC Builds program, there's lower cost financing as well, which I believe were some of and then the pre-zoning of land through the Housing Supply Act. All of those were some recommendations coming out of UDI, I think, recently. So those all contribute to it, but then there's still work to do on the tax side.
And I think that the challenge with some of those programs, and through some of my work with Journey Home, one of the things I sat around the table with BC Housing, and they said, we're going to build all these affordable units. The problem, and that was deep affordability versus affordable, or the problem, in my opinion, is the government can never afford to build enough product.
Right.
So yes, it's great that they're doing it, but if we look at the 32 million, I think it was 32 million, wasn't it, that the city got from the feds to put towards
the
this?
Housing Accelerator Fund.
So we're going to use that, and we're going to use it on 3 or 4 projects to buy the dirt for it.
Right.
And then we're done. So the city's put in all the land they can put in, and that's the only thing that gets built. In my opinion, we need a shift in policy towards supplementing the individual versus supplementing the industry. And I think where I would go with it is saying, if you took that 32 million and you had people that, talk about new home buyers, if we could incent them by giving them a $30,000 down payment, as the government, loan them a $30,000 down payment, we could have given 1,067 people enough money to buy a home.
Right.
Instead, we're going to build 400 or 500 units, maybe. of which, under the BC Builds program, only 20% will actually be affordable.
Right. So there's more work to do.
So, well, I just think there's other ways, and I don't know why we don't look at that, because it's the same, in my opinion, as housing. So we're going to build some apartment buildings that have 20% of 100 units, so we got 20 units that are affordable. Now it's like winning the lottery if you get one of those units, because everybody else is still in the regular market. But if we took that same, using the 32 million again, we could subsidize 1,000 people. I did the math before on this one, so it's good. I got to know.
I was going to say, you're doing this really quick.
$300 a month we could subsidize 1,000 people for 9 years.
Wow.
And those people would have the choice of where they lived in our community. And we could gear that. We already know what they make in money because they're submitting their taxes to the government, so easy to administer. And we could gear it to the community that one lives in. So if you're renting in Kelowna, you might need a little higher subsidy. If you're renting in Okanagan Falls, your subsidy might be a little smaller.
Right.
I feel like, we're trying to cut ribbons and we're trying to build buildings so we can point to it, but I'm not sure it's always the best use of funds.
So how do you ensure that those supplements that people are receiving are in perpetuity for more affordability into the future when we recover the loans, or what's the?
Yeah. So I think again the ownership piece. So one of the things everybody says, hey, my kid's never going to be able to afford a house because they can't come up with a down payment.
Yeah.
So how about we, as the government, loan that person the down payment, take a second mortgage on the home, and if that's a 10% down payment that we've provided, the government is now a 10% owner in that home.
Right.
So what happens when that value of the house goes up in time and they sell and move on? Guess what? Recoup the money plus the win of whatever the house has gone up in value as well. So it's really like your parents giving you a loan for your down payment.
Right.
But now we're saying, okay, well, you don't have to have rich parents to be able to get this. You have to show that you qualify to be able to make your payment, and you can do it. To me, it's a very simple program to answer.
Right.
I've brought that up with some folks in the BC housing world, and I get laughed at.
Right.
Well, we could never do that. Why not? Well, look at the money it would cost. Look at the money we're spending now.
Right. Fair. Now, you brought up a good point about homes, and I think if we can pull up the Infill graphic for a second, some expectations probably also have to shift, and this is another graphic from the official community plan of Kelowna. We're seeing a lot of infill happening because I think a lot of people, when they think of homes, they look at the one side of the screen, which says a detached family home, and not necessarily adjusting expectations. So just really quickly, because we're cutting short on time here, why is it important that we're investing into these missing middle projects? And do you think?
Well, I think again, in a world where new housing is the most expensive to deliver, the only way you can deliver less expensive housing is to make it smaller,
right,
and to put more on the same land base.
Right.
So I think that that's such an important piece of the puzzle, and I congratulate the city for its initiative on that. I think that is the way we need to go, right? Densification, less costs to look after roads and plow streets and infrastructure, all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. So just in closing, obviously a lot of young people interested in the housing file. What would your advice be to young people that are looking for a home, whether that's rental or market purchase into the future?
I think it's the same advice we got as when we were kids, which was a little while ago. If you caught the 32 years that I've been building houses, is save, right? The challenge in today's world that I see, and my kids are in the same thing, is you get feed to death on everything you do. You got your Netflix, you got your phone, you got your, all of these costs. And I think it's even harder today than it was before to save. And the amount you have to save is so much more.
Right.
So I think that's part of it, is looking at your lifestyle and deciding what's really important. Is it the $7 coffee or is it the home? And then resetting of expectations. So I think the grand house on the hill isn't going to come at 30 anymore. It might come at 45 or 50. Right. And so we need to go, okay, we can afford that small 400 square foot unit that's $299 now, and we're in the housing market at least.
Right.
And that'll be a forced savings plan for us to allow us to eventually go to that next piece. And that's why that continuum, that whole spectrum of housing being built in our city is important.
Right. And obviously adjusting our expectations in terms of finishes and
there's that too.
Granite countertops and waterfall showers and all of that.
In the town I grew up in, you had a big house at 1,200 square feet.
Right.
A big house, probably. One bathroom, you bet. Yeah. Not one for each kid, not 1,200 for the master.
Well, Shane, we're running out of time, but thank you for joining us today on our second episode, which is all about housing, chatting about that big challenge that we're faced with, not only here locally, but across the province and the country, something that's been neglected, in my opinion, for the past couple of decades, and we are continuing to work with the private sector to overcome that. So thank you so much, Shane, for your time today and your expertise, as always.
Thank you.
And we'll be back again for more episodes of Loyal's Community QuickCast, touching on some of the most important issues right here in Kelowna. And you can find me online on my social media channels at Loyal Kelowna. Thanks for joining, everybody.